the Supreme Court has delivered a historic verdict on President Trump's 20,000 ingestion period, with pride and 45 tariffs, a decision that has been eagerly anticipated by both supporters and critics alike, sending shockwaves across the nation. This ruling has the potential to alter the economic landscape in profound ways, affecting not just the stock market but also the everyday lives of ordinary citizens. This isn't just a legal battle in Washington. It's about the prices you pay, the jobs you depend on, and the health of our economy. The tariffs have been a point of contention, with many arguing that they have led to increased costs for consumers and businesses alike. For months, Americans have felt the sting of rising costs on everyday goods, from groceries to electronics. Families have had to make tough choices, cutting back on non-essentials to make ends meet. While businesses have struggled to stay afloat, small businesses in particular have been hit hard, with many facing the grim reality of closing their doors for good. The court's decision isn't just about constitutional theory, it's a ruling that will directly impact millions of Americans, either offering relief or cementing a costly new reality. The implications are vast, touching on everything from international trade relations to domestic economic policies. At its core, this case is about the limits of presidential power and the checks and balances that define our government. It raises questions about how much authority the president should have in shaping economic policy unilaterally, and the role of Congress in shaping our economic future. Lawmakers will now have to navigate this new legal landscape, potentially drafting new legislation to address the court's ruling. As we unpack this landmark decision, we'll explore how it reshapes the balance of power between the executive and legislative branches of government, and what it means for your wallet. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the ramifications of this pivotal moment in American history. A tariff is a tax on imported goods, designed to make foreign products more expensive and encourage buying American. In 2025, President Trump imposed sweeping tariffs on nearly all major trading partners, bypassing Congress by invoking emergency powers under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA. These tariffs were massive, up to 35% on some imports, and even ended exemptions for small online purchases, hitting consumers directly. Unlike past targeted measures, these were broad, permanent, and justified by presidentially declared emergencies. This aggressive use of executive power was unprecedented, sparking immediate backlash from businesses and legal experts. The stage was set for a monumental legal showdown over the very limits of presidential authority. The Trump administration justified the imposition of sweeping tariffs by invoking two national emergencies: the ongoing opioid crisis and the persistent U.S. trade deficit. This marked a significant shift in how national emergencies were used to shape economic policy, blending public health concerns with international trade strategy in a way that was both unprecedented and highly controversial. Heavy tariffs on imports from China and Mexico were presented as tools to pressure foreign governments into taking stronger action against drug trafficking, especially the flow of illegal opioids into the United States. By linking the fight against drugs to trade policy, the administration argued that economic leverage could be used to address urgent public health threats, even though critics questioned the effectiveness of this approach. Beyond the opioid crisis, the administration claimed that America's large trade deficits, particularly with China, posed a direct threat to national economic security. Tariffs, they argued, would serve as leverage to force trading partners into negotiating better deals for American workers and industries, and to reduce the country's reliance on foreign goods. However, many economists and legal experts were deeply skeptical of these justifications. They pointed out that tariffs are unlikely to solve complex issues like drug trafficking or trade imbalances, and warned that such measures would ultimately raise costs for American consumers and businesses. Small business owners in particular felt the pinch as supply chains were disrupted and prices increased. Critics argued that the declaration of national emergencies was less about genuine crises and more about providing legal cover for protectionist trade policies. Protests erupted across the country, and political analysts debated whether these moves were truly in the national interest or simply a way to bypass Congress and implement controversial policies. The notion that a trade deficit constitutes a national emergency was widely disputed in financial circles. Most experts agreed that trade deficits are not inherently harmful, and warned that labeling them as emergencies could set a dangerous precedent, potentially harming the U.S. economy in the long run. The seemingly arbitrary use of emergency powers, including threats to raise tariffs over unrelated political disputes, sparked a broader debate about the limits of executive authority. Many feared that such unchecked power could undermine democratic institutions and erode the checks and balances that are fundamental to the American system of government. The tariffs hit American families and businesses hard, raising the average household's annual costs by over $1,600. Prices on everything from groceries to electronics surged, squeezing budgets and fueling inflation. For many, this hidden tax meant tough choices and a higher cost of living. Businesses faced soaring costs, lost competitiveness, and were forced to cut jobs or delay investments. Economic models projected nearly 500,000 jobs lost and a 0.5% shrink in the U.S. economy if tariffs stayed. The uncertainty and chaos disrupted supply chains and chilled investment. America's reputation as a reliable trading partner suffered, and the policy's intended strength instead brought instability. The true cost was measured in lost opportunities and diminished economic growth. Legal challenges erupted as soon as the tariffs were announced, uniting businesses, industry groups, and state attorneys general. Plaintiffs argued that IEEPA was never meant to let the president wage a trade war or bypass Congress's constitutional power to tax. The U.S. Court of International Trade ruled unanimously against the tariffs, calling them an illegal overreach. The court affirmed that even in emergencies, presidential power has limits. The government appealed, but the Federal Circuit upheld the ruling, reinforcing that Congress, not the president, controls trade and taxation. Despite these defeats, the administration kept the tariffs in place by appealing to the Supreme Court. The stage was set for a final, high-stakes showdown over the separation of powers. The legal fight exposed a deep divide over presidential power. Supporters argued the president needs broad authority to act quickly in emergencies, claiming IEEPA was designed for such flexibility. They said tariffs are a legitimate tool and that Congress had willingly delegated this power. Opponents warned that unchecked executive authority undermines the Constitution, bypassing Congress's power of the purse and setting a dangerous precedent. For critics, the case was about defending the separation of powers and preventing the president from becoming an economic king. In a landmark decision that reverberated across the nation, the Supreme Court struck down the 2025 tariffs, ruling that President Trump had exceeded his authority under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. The court's opinion was delivered in a packed courtroom, with the eyes of the country watching closely as the justices addressed one of the most significant constitutional questions of the decade. The justices drew a clear and unmistakable line. While the president does have the power to respond to genuine foreign threats, that authority does not extend to imposing sweeping tariffs as a tool of general economic policy. The court stressed that emergency powers are not a license for the executive branch to bypass Congress on matters of taxation and trade. The court's majority opinion emphasized that the Constitution grants Congress alone the power to tax and regulate commerce. Any delegation of that power to the president must be both clear and strictly limited. The justices warned that allowing broad interpretations would undermine the separation of powers and threaten the very foundation of American democracy. The administration's sweeping interpretation of IEEPA was firmly rejected. The court described it as a blank check for presidential taxation, cautioning that such unchecked authority could set a dangerous precedent for future administrations. The justices also addressed the Nixon-era precedent, clarifying that the surcharges imposed in the 1970s were temporary, targeted, and enacted under different legal circumstances. The court made it clear that history could not justify the current administration's expansive actions. As a result, the tariffs were declared illegal and ordered to be lifted immediately. This decision brought swift relief to businesses struggling with higher costs and to consumers facing rising prices, signaling a return to constitutional norms and economic stability. The verdict was a decisive defeat for the administration, but it was also a powerful affirmation of the checks and balances that define the American system. For many, it was a victory for the rule of law and a reminder that no president is above the Constitution. The Supreme Court's decision marks a turning point for presidential power and trade policy. By reasserting Congress's central role, the court has checked executive overreach and set a precedent for future administrations. For families and businesses, the end of the tariffs means lower prices and a more stable economy. The ruling restores normalcy to global supply chains and encourages investment and growth. The debate over trade isn't over, but the focus now shifts back to Congress, where policy is shaped through debate and accountability. This case will be remembered as a test of America's checks and balances, reinforcing that even the president is bound by the Constitution. For everyday Americans, it's a welcome reprieve, and a reminder that the rule of law protects us all.